My father passed away like kind of like a tragic accident when I was 12. Our family put all of our money from his life insurance into the stock market, and that was 2007, and then just lost everything when the market crashed. And so that was my first, like, sort of real world kind of experience of, oh, this guy was trusted to manage all of our money, which was our only lifeline. And so it was very hard for me as a 12-year-old kid to understand how this man who's job it was to know this didn't know this. And so then I had to unwind, okay, how does the entire economy work? How does the stock market work? How are all these things interconnected? And I just tore through reading everything I possibly could. And by the end, I started to come across crypto and Bitcoin and some of these other ways that technology might be able to create trust and transparency and reduce the likelihood that some of these things can happen.
Thanks for coming to the Useful Podcast. I call it useful because it's useful for you, useful for me, and useful for the listener. That's kind of the setup. So yeah, before we get started, I was kind of curious if you want to explain how, I was kind of curious how you got into crypto, how you got into podcasting, your whole realm, and how you entered the space.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess that's a long story, so the answer might be a little long, but
Or what was your introduction? What was the introduction or the first moment you knew? I guess let's talk about your opening into podcasting. Or was that before your opening into crypto?
It was actually at the exact same time, so that's probably a nice way of putting it. So it was a little after my first entrepreneurial journey. So I kind of got my first VC check in college, building an on-demand tutoring platform for students and tutors to connect. And so that was kind of my first little go around to like meet people and start to get integrated into kind of the networks in Austin that I was in. And at the time, Austin had like a pretty strong crypto developer community. So Ethereum was just starting to get off the ground. There were some people from companies like Augur doing early prediction markets and stuff like that. So it was a really cool group of like essentially just very cracked developers. I mean, it was like you go to these meetups and these dudes legitimately had not showered in weeks, and you could understand like 3 words out of their mouth because they were brilliant. There was no money to be made. There was like, these guys were there because they loved cryptography and the technology. And so that was my first kind of opportunity to meet some of those guys, some of the early Ethereum meetups and just kind of like being around it. And I met during that process 2 guys who had been doing a bunch of hackathons, who had actually launched one of the earliest crypto exchanges. It was, I think, first or second, and they were so early that the SEC had like thrown them in jail because the like regulations weren't clear. And so, I mean, these guys were, real OGs, and they were probably still some of the smartest developers I've ever met. So pretty quickly, I realized that the smart people were seeming to be attracted like a moth to the flame to that industry, and it really hooked me because I just really loved the people who I was meeting in the industry.
That's interesting. And I guess around that time, I read that you're also an intern. You were interning at the White House. Kind of curious how you ended up there, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a wild time in my life, honestly. There was too much going on, and I was having to make, big decisions, honestly. And so how that kind of came about, I just honestly knew that like Trump was probably going to have kind of a hard time getting interns. And I had some family friends who, one of our family friends, she was actually on my podcast. She was Ronald Reagan's secretary at the White House, and then went on to run his library.
I thought I kicked you out for a sec.
Weird warning saying I think a VPN or something was blocking it, which is strange. Hopefully that doesn't mean I'm getting hacked. But yeah, do you want to just keep going from where I was, or kind of just let me know where to reset?
Well, I guess curious. Well, I guess how you ended up with the internship at the White House.
Yeah. So yeah, one of my neighbors who I grew up with, she had been Ronald Reagan's secretary at the White House when he was in office, and then she went on to run his presidential library, and so she was somewhat connected, and she had just kind of like mentioned offhand that he's trying to find some interns and I might be a good fit for it, and so I kind of applied and not thought much of it, and then by the time I got accepted to it, I had started this crypto company, and we had started developing very early decentralized exchanges. We had built out the first one that was actually functional. And so we were kind of on the edge of launching it. And then I kind of had to make this hard decision, decide whether to go intern, go to the White House. And so I was like, okay, I'll go, we'll check it out. I'll make sure the guys are working, and maybe I can meet some good investors, and maybe I can push them on policy and help them kind of like, because really the problem with that company was we were told, unless you get $20 million for all the money transfer licenses, like they're gonna throw you in jail and, forget about the key. Like it was, back when Ross Ulbricht and others were getting prosecuted for, the Silk Road. And this was essentially technology that would allow anyone to transact on anything without any government intermediary. And so there was a lot of you can do amazing things with that, but they're also it's not something governments typically like. So at that point, I had to make a pretty difficult decision while I was at the White House because we had a guy who had founded the Toronto Stock Exchange who was interested in investing in the project. He was one of the few people who was like, okay, this guy's started an exchange before. He kind of knows the right people and can introduce us to the right in the right ways. So I actually left the White House to go meet with him in LA because he was like, well, it's now or never. I'll be in LA. So either take this meeting, and so I had to make this about. It's like, I hope Trump would be proud of me. I'm gonna try and go out there and like make America proud and build out some cool tech. And I've got a responsibility to all these great people who are working with me. So that was that was how that all came
That's
about.
it's an exciting journey, actually. And even before that, actually, even before any of the companies, you come from a family of MDs, and kind of curious, you mentioned you were a kid who wanted to put every piece together, like the Lego sets, the Corvette engine. So how did you end up in crypto instead of, or no, I wouldn't even say it's crypto. I would say like decentralization or decentralized environments, decentralized organizations, or I wouldn't decentralized philosophy rather than like a doctor. Kind of curious
Yeah.
where that shift came in.
I think I didn't want to just do what my family had done. It seemed like that path was laid out for me. It was very much like you want to take over your dad's practice someday and you just go to med school and you just do these things. And, but I wanted to trailblaze something. I wanted to kind of like take the foundation that he'd built and take it a step farther. You always want to, and I had grown up with my aunt was in finance. And so she had just been feeding me books on anything and everything related to, technology moguls and people building out, new and innovative stuff that inspired me. And I think my family was always frankly very entrepreneurial. My father, even though he was an orthopedic surgeon, he was building out the robotics technology for Stryker at the time, where he was doing remote controlled knee surgeries, and he was like spearheading a lot of the foundational pieces of like robotic assisted surgery. So he was always tinkering with things in the garage, like he was forcing me to go out, build things, make things, try things, and that was very much his philosophy. It was work hard and go do things. And I got to see him run his practice, his orthopedic practice. I spent every summer there, basically working the front desk and taking patients back. And he was the kind of guy who'd have me taking out stitches when I was 10 years old, and the patients would be like, wait, you're gonna let this 10-year-old kid take my stitches out? I don't know if it's legal or not,
Is
but
that
he's like, yep. And you just do it. And so I learned pretty early on, just sometimes the stuff is not that hard to do, and you just gotta like go for it when you have the opportunity.
10-year-old surgeon?
Yeah, they used to call me Doogie Howser because I'd go into all the surgeries with him.
It's amazing. I guess back to the philosophy of decentralization. I feel like you've started a company every couple of years, from Tutor, Penubra, UBDI, Open Transact, and now Dataing as well. And it seems like they all revolve around a similar idea, which is like decentralize, democratize, or give people access to information, give people access to their own data. And am I coming like in the right angle? Where does that come from?
I think partially it's distrust of like big organizations that are centralized. I think there was early on, I mean, really how I got into crypto, honestly, was my father passed away like kind of like a tragic accident when I was 12. Our family put all of our money from his life insurance into the stock market, and that was 2007, and then just lost everything when the market crashed. And so that was my first, like, sort of real world kind of experience of, oh, this guy was trusted to manage all of our money, which was our only lifeline. His one job was sell, so this doesn't, like, know if this is going to happen and make sure that we don't get affected by it. And so it was very hard for me as a 12-year-old kid to understand how this man who's job it was to know this didn't know this, and so then I had to unwind. Okay, how does the entire economy work? How does the stock market work? How are all these things interconnected? And I just tore through reading everything I possibly could, and by the end, I started to come across crypto and Bitcoin and some of these other ways that technology might be able to create trust and transparency and reduce the likelihood that some of these things can happen. But the more I only got increasingly passionate about it as I actually had to go deeper and deeper into the system and see the inner workings of all these things and realize that a lot of the people who were who were holding the strings were not necessarily the people you want to be in that position.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another level too. It's like to get to those positions. I think you can't be a good person to even get to that position. It takes a certain level of maneuvering.
Not even just maneuvering. I mean, it's like constant shit testing, and I've been, a part of it in many different places. The types of don't know how to describe them, but like a lot of these organizations where they will very explicitly test you, and you will be doing a little clicker quiz, and it'll be like, okay, if we want to stop foreign countries from ditching the US dollar, how should we do that? And A is like, stop weaponizing sanctions to ruin their economy. B, bomb the shit out of them. C, bomb them into oblivion. D, bomb them and all their children. And you're just like, oh, and then 99% of the room is like, B through D, all the above. But,
Yeah.
and I'm the one guy who's like, maybe we just don't, weaponize the sanctions. And so you start to realize like in those rooms, I'd say it's half kids who, don't really understand why any of these things are bad and they just know to say the right thing. And then half the kids, they understand what they're signing up for and they're willing to make that deal with the devil. So that was also what drew me back into crypto time and time again, frankly, was just I met a lot of people who were passionate about this stuff, who had been pushed out of the legacy systems, who could no longer, who had reached that kind of pinnacle and realized, oh, I gotta sign this deal if I'm ever gonna go farther. And they said, instead of that, like, I'll go work in my garage and try to build something better and try to build these systems. And I think there's been a real war between those people and, the legacy incumbents who come in and try to really give them a bad name by launching all these sketchy projects and trying to like, taint what is really a group of typically pretty honest and hardworking and intelligent people.
I mean, I would say it goes into the technology as well, like crypto, Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it. It gets a bad rep more because of how it's utilized rather than the technology itself. I like it. It's a pure technology, just realistically, just looking at it. It's meant to make sure that anyone anywhere can always use money, right? Has
It's
access
pretty
to it.
simple. Yep. It's pretty simple and egalitarian. And I think it's also that's one of the reasons I started the podcast is like a lot of the sketchiest people try to make it unnecessarily complex, where they try to use the, big words and all this terminology and take these pretty simple concepts like should we inflate the supply or not, and they just wrap them in all these words so that no one can really understand what's going on. And that's why I wanted to really just talk to the people who I found to be interesting, typically people who were having trouble getting platformed on, the outlets that people were looking towards, and give them just an opportunity to explain what they were doing and why they're doing it. And I think what was most interesting about that is like in an industry that was just plagued by people, rugging each other and scamming, like people who came on my show, there was maybe like one who did that out of over 100 episodes, which is, I mean, that's an insane track record for being in
Yeah.
crypto that long. And a lot of it was if you're willing to show your face and you're capable of coming on a show and talking for an hour about what you're doing and it's unscripted, and I tell you it's unscripted, I'm not going to cut it, I'm not going to edit it. If you say something that gets you in trouble, like that's on you. Sorry. And I have had had one or two people come back and try to get me to edit it, and I haven't.
Interesting. I love that. So I guess UBDI stands for all the listeners stands for Universal Basic Data Income. So that means people owning and monetizing their own data, and kind of I'm thinking like with dating as well. I've talked to I've talked to Eric, and it sounds like there's almost a similar vibe with dating and UBDI. Is it almost? Yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on what was going on there. Was there any
Yeah.
inspiration?
So Certainly some inspiration. A lot. I learned a lot from UBDI. UBDI was not is one of the few companies I did not start. It was someone who kind of like someone who I'd known for a long time, partnered up with a guy. He had started personal.com back in the day, and he had sold personal.com to another company who then kind of like wanted him to rebuild this system on top, and they really just wanted like a way to help people monetize their data on top of the system that helped them make their data portable, and store a lot of it in the cloud. And it was a kind of a complicated system because you needed two apps, but they had a ton of, or we built out a ton of connectors for different data sources. And we worked with a lot of researchers from Target and Best Buy and Harvard Business School to just understand this data. And I think what was interesting to me about that was, for one, I thought that there would be a lot more people who could take multi-source data and make sense of it. And I thought, someone at Target, Target must have a guy that does this, or, and these big companies frankly did not. And the entire market research industry was full of all this fake data. We thought we could come in and say, look, we can validate all of your results. We can give you all this extra certainty on, who's coming through the system and learn about them, and simplify the survey process by autofilling with things that, are unbiased and direct from the source. But most of them did not want that. In fact, they like ran for the hills. They were like, no, don't go anywhere near our data. We don't want to know what's in it. We don't want, because I mean, if you think about it, we've been selling this data to these companies for 10 years for, $100 million. And now we're going to come back
Yeah.
to them and say, sorry, it was all BS. Like, that's the last thing in the world they want. But then you take that one step farther and you're like, how much of all research is BS? And you start to realize, like, it almost all was, which is also a terrifying thought to realize that, like, that the data that we're making almost all of our decisions on is just like fraught with fraud.
Yeah,
And
you see, even with universities, sometimes you see like articles or research papers just competing against each other, just come out at the same time. And it's just, I wonder whose money is behind what.
And that's what it was. I mean, we even did studies where, like, we had people come from these nonprofits saying, we want to study, like, why people who are impoverished are impoverished. And you'd be like, great, we can actually, we never actually took a dime in revenue. We gave every penny straight to the user. So we're like, here's an opportunity where you can take all this money you've raised to solve this problem and just directly go give it to these people just for saying, like, giving a few insights about it. Well, they wanted us to package it into a 2-hour survey that paid out like 25 cents. And I'm like, you're wondering why these people don't have money? You're trying to pay them 12 cents an hour to work for you. Like, it's just that. It was, the lady comes on with a diamond ring the size of, it was comical and just so frustrating dealing with people like that and trying to do, the right thing. And I think it was also tough with the users. No one trusted us. They, always assumed that we were, like Facebook and all these other people who they shouldn't have trusted with the data. And, I didn't blame them for that. I was like, yeah, you should be skeptical because most people are doing it the wrong way. But, very hard to build that trust and show people that, you're doing it the right way. And that's in large part why I think with this company, we're trying to take a different approach, which is not making the monetization the core of the product. That's not why you come to use it. You use it so that the data can make your life better. And that was always what I wanted to do, like matching people with research and ads. Like, that's great, but matching people with each other is so much more powerful and so much more important. And so being able to do that and show people, look, like, this data can be so powerful when it is leveraged for good things, in the same way that it could be so terrible when it's leveraged for all the worst things. And most people really just have an experience of seeing it leveraged for all the worst things. And so, trying to help them understand, like, there are these laws, many of which at the time we were helped get past, giving people the rights to that data. Because we were in DC, I was talking to Mark Warner and all these guys. They would call me up and get little sound bites for CNN. But, we were like, look, we've given you the right to this data. Now you can take it. You can go do whatever you want with it. That'll make your life better and easier. But, all these big companies have a very big vested interest in making that as difficult as possible, as scary as possible, making sure that all the incumbents have the same level of trust that they do, which is none. And then they'll come to us and still try to get us to validate their data.
That's interesting. That's funny, actually. And I also want to go talk about quickly about Open Transact as well. I think it's pretty unique. It's almost like payments for companies or the industries that the world ignores or the world wants to ignore.
Yeah.
Like everything from cannabis, adult gambling, crypto, dating, and whatever else you could come up with, right?
just anything that Stripe, Square, like others won't touch, essentially Shopify. So yeah, it's kind of it's a very strange industry because it's essentially too small of a carve out for these like big all-encompassing payment providers to want to deal with the compliance and the added risk associated with them, and they just don't really want to build out systems that like will handle them. And a lot of that has to do with the banking partners and just kind of like creating these one size fits all systems. But you know, they're still massive industries, and they frequently will just get debanked or taken off these platforms with little or no notice, especially the cannabis ones. Like they would just change their policies overnight and decide, okay, CBD was fine one day, now it's not okay anymore. Some law passed, oh, now it's okay. And so, you know, their business would just grind to a halt. All of a sudden, they would get kicked off all their processors and they would have no way of processing payments. Some of these businesses, you know, the strip clubs, some of them do 100 million a month, strip club chains, you know, like there's real money
Yeah.
going through these systems. And they were paying exorbitant fees to process those payments, up to like 10% sometimes, just because of the risk profiles. So we essentially just built out all of the technology that they were missing from Square, Shopify, and Stripe and packaged it in a way that they could utilize it. And, you know, a lot of my day was just, yeah, dealing with people who were managing, you know, somewhat seedy industries. It was the strip club owner, it was the guy that owns the dispensary. A lot of these guys were a little off their rockers, and some of them were scary and mobsters for sure.
Do
But
you
you know,
meet a lot of those characters just based on the industry you're in?
those ones in particular, like, yeah, I mean, they would come to us. They would kind of beat down the door and be like, look, you know, I got $100 million a month that it just got frozen, and you guys better fix this tomorrow. And I'm going to call you every minute of the day until this is fixed. And, you know, that was probably one of the few companies I've been a part of where the business really did just all come to us so easily because the incumbents were just really bad to them. And really, it's a customer service industry at the end of the day. They want to know if there's something wrong with my account, can I call up the CEO and will he fix it? And if they were dealing with Stripe or Square or any of that, you're not going to get it fixed. Even if you're a guy running $100 million a month industry, you still don't have a guy. So that was a big lesson in that, honestly. And just seeing like how they had, you know, really disregarded entire swaths of the industry.
Yeah, I've had a similar. I come from a factoring background, and I had a similar experience with like factoring type of clients where if they're not getting paid, and you'll hear it instantly
Yeah,
because
yep, yep. And they will not be happy with you if you're the one standing in between them not getting paid. So they would call me pretty angry throughout the
yeah,
day.
that's the fun thing with working with money type of businesses. But you've hosted like I guess hundreds of founders and heard their stories. What do you like? What do you even like hearing? Sitting down, hearing all these stories. What's your favorite part about doing that?
I mean, probably my favorite is like I get them pretty early. I'm like a pretty good scout. I should be a VC scout. Like a lot of the guys on my crypto podcast, like I was their first interview, and so these guys are so green. You know, they're just coming out, and you know, probably like I don't know what 10% of them are running $1 billion or more companies now. And so just seeing like how quickly that arc can kind of form, and seeing them also getting to catch up with them in between, where like crypto is a very up and down market cycle, so it really does make you humble compared to a lot of other founders where they just get kind of the nothing but upside. So to see them through the ins and the outs, just heads down, seeing them, you know, continue to build and continue to ship, and then getting to see, you know, when things turned around, seeing just kind of like how quickly all of that work started to pay off for them. And it was really cool just seeing your friends all like win, you know, and typically all start to win at the same time. They're all kind of like in the trenches and things are rough, and they're all kind of together, like supporting each other throughout that. And then things get good again, and they all find ways to help each other out, and still make time for each other, and kind of remember the people who were there before they made it.
So yeah, I love that. And is a lot of do you think a lot of I guess crypto or yeah crypto startups? Do you think it's based on they feed off the environment or almost the like the scene rather than what's going on? So if it's a bull market, the startups would all like they'll feel significant demand, or if it's a what do you call it, a bear market, they will feel significant headwinds.
I mean, absolutely. And like the type of founders who start one in a bear market versus a bull market are entirely different. The guys who come when the money is good, they are the ones who are the first ones gone as soon as the money starts to dry up. And the ones who are starting it when it's really a passion project and there's not much money to be made, like those are the ones you bet on. Which ironically VCs never do. They always wait till the bull market hits, and then they gotta wade through all these, fair weather friends who they typically always pick wrong on them. Like if you just deployed in the bear market, you guys would be fine. Find the people who are willing to stick through it. And that's really what killed most of these teams, was just not sticking through it. So most of the ones who just had a very concrete vision, understood what they were trying to accomplish, and then in the bull market set aside enough money to continue on. And you could, in many cases, like these guys were raising 40-50 million dollars, like that'll get you, 6 years if you need it, and that'll get you, to the next market cycle at least. And so just budgeting for that and being wise, I found really set the founders apart who are still around now. But really, it was the passion and just being willing to build through the ups and the downs. A lot of people are, they're just there for the ups, and I think VCs really push people to cave too early. They try to tell you if you don't have traction right away, then just go to the next thing and start over again. And I meet so many people in crypto, founders who, every cycle they've got 12 other things and they're just, continuing to try their hand and hope that something will take off. But all the ones I've seen who have been successful have just stuck with it and kept building throughout and made it better each time. Because good things do take time. And if you're building on new technology, it also takes a while for people to catch up to whatever you're building and understand it and appreciate it. And so I think that's especially true when you're building in emerging industries.
Sense. And do you view dating as like a Web3 app, or how do you really view a Web3 with what you're doing?
I would not say it's a Web3 app. I'm trying not to make it wholly Web3. I think it will be Web3 when everything becomes Web3, which I do think is coming actually pretty soon. So we're trying to position it for sort of the world that's coming, but without scaring people off who are not quite ready and see that coming around the corner. But what I would like it to be is the infrastructure for that sort of Web3 world as it comes about. In the same way that Facebook was really the infrastructure for like app developers in the early days of app development. They bootstrapped all of the personalization and monetization for app developers in the early days and created this massive wave of indie developers who then built out all these products that people like really know and love. And then Facebook pulled the plug and kind of screwed everyone. And I think since they have, frankly, everything has just kind of like sucked. And so I think I'm hoping to bring that wave back and to not rug the developers and to give them a package that they can build on top of, while also serving as sort of the showcase ourselves of what all this stuff can do when it's properly pieced together.
Curious how you see the world coming out now, because the way I see it, with AI and a lot of how products are being built, maybe in like a year from now or 2 years from now, it might just be like headless products, or like a headless laptop, whatever that might look like, or a headless phone, whatever that might look like. Curious how you see like dating going into those types of situations.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for crypto generally, I think it's going to be great because I think crypto has been terrible at creating front ends and helping people understand how to use these like incredibly complex pieces of software. So having AI to read all the white papers, to actually understand the tokenomics and just come back with you and just say, all right, here's what you need to know. Do you want me to make this transaction? Just say yes, and not to click 1,000 screens, and where you click the wrong button, you lose everything. And like there are all these pain points that I think it will ultimately solve. And so I think that's one of the hard parts about building in today's day and age, is understanding like what of those things are going to be,
Yeah,
eaten
what's not
alive.
obsolete, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's actually one reason like we picked the direction we picked, because I felt like dating would be the last thing that people would trust a company like OpenAI with. That's something that requires a lot of trust, and it's something that the large incumbents like Facebook basically like copied us 1-to-1 on their AI matchmaker. Like they took the color codes, the fonts, like everything was the same, even the examples they used on the website. But they can't convince their users to link more data. Like we had way more context. We understand people better than they ever will because they can't go to their users and say, "Can you give us more of that data that you already, trusted us with?" Like people are just like, "No, get out of here." And so like that is the one thing that is probably the most important, like the most important moat you can build is trust with your users, and an understanding there, and then just providing massive value and sticking to the things that you say you're going to do. And so that's really what we've been focused on. And I think, the fight between even, I mean, in the early days of this company, everyone told me like, "You're just a ChatGPT wrapper. Like you'll never be anything." And they were like, "Okay, well, you want to give me $1 billion to make a foundational model? If you do, I'll do it,
Yeah.
and I'll probably make ones better than these guys. But I know you're not going to do that, so get over yourself." And then 6 months later, it was like, "Oh wait, these wrappers are great. We can make money on these," and they were all
Yeah.
excited about that. But then they've got something. Then it's like, "Oh, but you haven't monetized it yet. You don't have 100,000 ARR," and you're like, "Actually, no dating app that's been successful in the last 10 years has monetized before year 3." And they're like, well, we think that one will. And then they funded all these companies that immediately tried to charge everyone $30 every time they set them up. And they created business models that could just not scale. And they ran into every issue I told them they would run into, and they all failed. And they spent $10 million doing it. And, they burned quick and they learned quick, I guess. But that's not what I wanted to do. And we were able to build out all this tech in a much more reasonable way. And really,
Yeah.
the longest term vision was, I want this data to be private, and I want local models to be driving a lot of the interactions so that you feel like you can truly trust the system, because the system is not just feeding all of your data back to these big AI labs. And for that, we kind of had to slow roll things because the technology simply didn't exist. And that also completely changes the business model that has been built on all of this technology, which is essentially, let's just upcharge the API costs of a lot of these providers. So I think that's the moment we're in now, and that's kind of the moment we've had to prepare for 3 years ago before anyone knew we'd be here. And luckily we were right. So we'll see if we can bring it home now.
That's interesting. And curious what your role looks like too. What do you do versus what does Eric do as president, or how does your team look like?
So, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I try to find people who can do a bunch of things. Eric is super great because he's super versatile. He'll do, he does. I really hate the outbound part of like my job. So he's really good at being like, "You should meet this person. Here's where we should go. Here's here are some connections that need to be made." But he balances that with, being really great on product and understanding just kind of like how we should architect things and where a user is going to get lost, and managing, all the user feedback and turning that into like actual actionable feedback that he then helps prioritize everything from recruiting, etc. Then you need some really good developers. That's always been the key. I think the hardest part of that right now is just with LLMs, like figuring out what needs to be done through LLM and what is
I
going to
mean,
piss off the developer too much. Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of curious. Has it been harder for you guys to identify talented developers because of LLMs now?
No, I don't think so. Not as far as identifying them. I think it has mostly just been harder to figure out like what is the better, how to get them to all interoperate with different like styles of developing. So if you have a bunch of them that are really comfortable with LLMs, you don't want to stick them with someone who hates using LLMs, and they will just not get along. The one guy will just
Yeah.
want to rip up everything and start over every time. And so figuring out what is the workflow here, how can we separate these pieces so that what's being done without LLMs is mostly unaffected by things that are being done on top of it. So how do we separate the front and the back end, and have the LLM native guys focus on front end stuff that, it can less likely mess anything up too badly. And also just like how involved the PMs and me in particular are. So like I was doing the design work for a lot of the app, and I was basically building out the front end. I built out the entire front end for the first version of our app. But that was me also doing it entirely with ChatGPT, because I wanted to see just like how far we could take the tooling, and
Yeah.
how messy it would make it for integrating it with the backend with my CTO. And that was a painful process, definitely at times. It'd be me just breaking everything randomly and yelling at him in the middle of the night. And he's like, "I don't know what you did. You got like 100,000 lines of code that just got pushed. I don't even know where to
Yeah.
start." So that was growing pains a little bit, and it's also growing pains where you're like, in 6 months it will be good enough that that we don't have to worry about this as much. So how do we work this into our workflow without breaking anything in the immediate term, but also setting up these processes so that when it is good enough, we can be agile enough to really compete with the big guys.
Hmm. That makes sense. So I guess what are you planning for? I mean, Eric told me a little bit about what you guys are doing for I guess V2 in the next couple of weeks in the year. But I'm curious, even beyond dating, kind of curious about what you think, like over the next year, what you plan to do. It seems like your role is pretty split as well. You're doing a lot of different things. You're continuously doing a lot of different things. So kind of curious about your plans.
Yeah, I'm always doing too many things. But as far as my plans, I mean, really what we're trying to do now. So I built, I think, 12 apps in the last week on top of our API. So we're expanding out to get more developers building on top of us, making these profiles portable, making them fun, finding all the cool things that you can do with this data socially and across like dozens of other use cases. And that's kind of the hard
And
part,
it's
is it? Sorry.
just curious. This is the social dating card that I'm seeing. I've seen Eric post it a bunch, and I was actually curious about getting one too. But it was just like the card that you put on your. It's a link that shows you everything, right?
Yes. And so that card, for the most part, the one that he is sending around, really specific to dating, but we can modify that entire, I call it a profile, and we can enable tons of other applications on top of it. So maybe you want to use it for recruiting, and the same system that helps us figure out who's compatible for a relationship can help us figure out, who's compatible for a team. And we can bring in other people who are a part of that team into the system and see, how will these six people operate together? What are the personality types that might not be consistent? What is the work that they've been doing that might mesh well together? They can connect their GitHub and see, okay, are they, writing in the same sort of like style? Do they like to leave comments? And, there are all these things that help you better understand people that the system can do. And that extends to like just things that are, so far unrelated. We got a system that will just make highly personalized music for you or for any group of people in the room by just taking in your tastes and deeply understanding like what you like. And so, personalization and deeply understanding the user when it comes to AI and intent, like there's so much you can do with it. And I think
Yeah.
now we're just finding the right partners to do cool stuff on
I
top
think
of it.
that's like the best part about Web3, which is like the personalization and the decentralization. Like I can have my own like recording studio. I can have my own, I can go to a club with my friends and it could be our own DJ, like our own playlist music, just like you said, right? That'd be like the personalization levels could get to.
No, and that's yeah, exactly. And that's what's exciting about doing some of the stuff in Web3 is there are really amazing developer communities. People are very willing to work together and interoperate in a way where in Web2 you might have a half dozen contracts and you're, arguing over every little detail. And a lot of these Web3 guys are like, yeah, send me the API, I'll go build something. And within a week, they built something on it and they've got users and the users are giving you really good feedback. And over time the users become, owners of that product. And it's a great sort of incentivization mechanism to bring these people together in Web3 is kind of what I hope. And what I hope for Web3 is that it's a mechanism that allows Web3 to be a little bit more social and a little bit more like bridge the gap between the anonymity and the kind of like normal operations of business. Because I think those worlds are going to converge a little bit, but you don't want it all the time. So you have to know, when do I share what with whom? And, if I'm just taking a meeting, here's what they might want to know about me. If I'm going on a date, maybe I don't share my wallet balance until, I know I can trust this girl. And so there are all these edge cases, but at the same time, it's very nice to know, oh, this dude who I met on Twitter, this is him on LinkedIn, and here's exactly how we might want to work together. And he actually knows this guy who would be a huge help to my business. And, I found out even just moving to where I've moved recently, there are like 4 or 5 people who I've known on Twitter for years who are like down the street from me. And it's like, that would have been nice to know, a year ago when I didn't have friends and didn't think anyone was nearby me. So,
Yeah.
it's just a little thing sometimes.
Where are you, by the way?
Right now I'm in Pacific Northwest, so I'm up near Portland, but I'm back and forth between here and LA pretty much.
That's a nice trip.
Yeah, I do my technical work out in the woods, and then go down to LA do the marketing stuff. So it's a little hot and cold, but I like it that way, honestly.
So I guess you've given almost like, it sounds like a whole I would say your whole life, but I would just say like the last decade, last couple of decades, or I'd just say decade. I don't want to age you.
Yeah.
To to like the mission of like to this mission of data decentralization, giving people back their own agency, and going forward, like what would you call? When would this be worth it for you, or is it already worth
I
it?
mean, I'd say in a lot of ways it's already worth it. I've gotten to see kind of like the impact that a lot of the things I've done has had, and just seeing like the little trickle down effects, which is really gratifying. Just seeing, people that I've helped connect that, I don't know if they would have gotten where they could if they didn't like meet the right few people. And so just seeing how powerful that has actually really inspired me to continue doing what I am doing, which should, juice that and give that opportunity to everyone. And I think but I do think I have been extra passionate about what we're working on right now because I think it is like a generational problem where if we don't solve how to get like, birth rates up and people, out of their basements and out with friends and talking to each other again, like the quality of life has gone down so far that I think we really need to prove that like technology will make your life better again because I think that was a
Yeah.
people kind of always assume that to be the case. And for the first time, we're kind of taking a step back and saying, actually, it seems like our lives are getting worse now.
I
And
mean,
so,
it's because a lot of technology is optimized for engagement or optimized for continued use. This is the whole problem with ChatGPT too, but it was optimized for continued use. So like the way that LLM was designed was kind of, it turned a normal thought, turned it bad. And same things with like other things. It just happens. So
100%. Yep. And I think, and then people just get so used to that being the way it is that no one tries anything different. It's like, oh, this is the path to monetization. You add a premium subscription. And no one ever thinks, what about all these other things we could do? Or the ones that do think that, get shot down very quickly by people who own large shares of the incumbents. And so there's a lot of that too. But I think this is, make or break for us to show that and also just inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs who I've met a lot of recently that have actually made me pretty excited because I think we lost a whole generation who were like, I don't want to build B2B SaaS. I'm sorry. And like, I don't blame them. And honestly, that was probably the right move. But you got to get those people to go build the future or else we get a future like we have now. And so I think we got to re inspire a generation to go out there and build the world that they want to build instead of just getting stuck in the one that they were born into.
I think AI is helping with just seeing the possibility too. That's the other side. Like it gives anyone access to build stuff. And whenever people realize anyone can do it, like I think that would be the change, but there's still a lot of hesitation around it.
There always is. And I think, but I think that's exactly right. Like, I run little workshops with guys in Nigeria who are, using LLMs for all building out every app that you could imagine, creating content, getting their rap careers off the ground because they never afford a studio and to get all this stuff mixed professionally. And now they have the tools and now they can actually formalize the art that they've always wanted to make. And so it really is going to hopefully democratize all this stuff. And I think that's why I'm especially also passionate about local models because I think that's kind of like the last bridge we have to cross where there is sort of this future where only the rich people get access to the best models. And, that is kind of what's happened where all my buddies who, have worked at Apple or Google, they get access to unlimited context models with, all the compute they could ever dream of. And, they are building better stuff because they have more access to that. And, often running
Do you not
bills that are
feel
20 grand.
Yeah, do you not feel like having access to that level of abundance would make it worse? Or like make the person also worse at using the product itself? Like in a lot of, or not, or even building it out, when you look at a lot of different countries, innovation happens because they didn't have the resources to do. I mean, we could talk about building nukes, right? Like India built its nuke without the resources that a bunch of other countries needed. And they did it because they didn't have the resources and they needed to do it anyway. So there's
Yep.
when you're putting a rock in a hard place, you'll do it.
And I mean, that's why the local models are so good because the Chinese are needing to distill these models from the US because Claude is
Yeah.
blocking off Chinese companies, So, like, it has created that. And that is kind of the beauty of, seeing these systems but rebalance themselves. And most of the big companies are just producing slop and they're cutting out vendors and they're rebuilding parts of their infrastructure that were too expensive or whatever, but they're not innovating with it, and the people who are working for them are not inspired to innovate on their behalf, even though they have these tools at their disposal. So I really don't worry that much about the incumbents. They're too big, they're too happy where they are. I think the biggest threat is always, just some scrappy young kid who can now inspire enough people to go out there and do it. But that being said, even with all of this access, it is kind of sad how few people are really leveraging it to do cool stuff. I would have thought that consumer AI at this point would be so much farther along than it is, and everyone's just building B2B SaaS. And it's just, I think
I think
it's sad.
the problem with consumer AI is at least it's all really, I feel like selling to a consumer is much harder than selling to a business because consumers are not really that rational of people. And
Yep.
like a business, you can always say is going to be always logical at the very least. So all you had to do is make a logical agreement. With consumers, you might need to make an emotional agreement or some other.
Consumer is so much more art than science. I think with B2B, you can really just get it down. And it's also a lot of consumer is, nepotism or network based. It's, oh, do I know the guy who has the purchasing power at this company? And a lot of the deals get done that way. And you can't really buy off the consumer like that. I've watched our competitors try to dump $10 million into marketing and get less users than we've spent $100 on. It really is like you can't just force your way into it. You have to create that cultural moment and really understand what the pain points are, and the solutions they say they want are typically not the solutions they actually want. You have to package it in such a way that they fully understand it. So it's not easy to do.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I'm kind of curious about your even what I guess you're a mentor at the Oregon Accelerator, and you were talking about, I guess, meeting a lot of different entrepreneurs. Kind of curious how you stepped into that role and yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was really Eric, I think, looking back on it. Eric, so I was in Portland. I was like, Eric, I don't really know enough people here. Can you just find some interesting people for me to meet? And you just lined up meetings for me all week. And, it's crazy how, like, one super connector like Eric can just change your whole life when you move to a new city, And I'm not the person who would have gone out and just cold DM'd all these people and set up meetings. But, he was. And so that's really how it came about. And I just kind of was like, hey, can I help out in any way? And they needed help. And there definitely weren't enough mentors in the area, and a lot of kids who needed help, and I've just been doing my best to get them onboarded with like the newest tools. It was really cool because they're, initially they were planning on having just an idea of what their app would look like, or what, just very low kind of hanging fruit. But I got them set up with Codex, I got them set up with Figma's AI, I got them just end to end set up, and I was like, just make it. You guys can make this in the next week. And anytime they got a little like they were struggling a little bit, I just pull it up on my computer, do it for it, get like 30% of the way there, send it off to them, help them get set up. And a lot of times they just don't have anyone who's using these tools to like their full capability, so they don't understand what's possible. And I think it's as simple as just showing them it is possible, and then they believe it is, and they take it the rest of the way. And they picked it up super quick. Took like 30 minutes of my time, and they'd figured it out. So like they just had never had anyone say like, yes, this is possible, go do it. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, sometimes all you just need is that or even just not even like, can you do this? And you just, once you know you can do this, you're like, oh wow. Then you just go down a whole rabbit hole.
And that's the benefit of, I got lucky to grow up around a lot of really cool people who I just saw go out and do it. And once you see it, it's so easy. But when you grow up somewhere, a lot of people here I think grow up, kind of in the boondocks, and don't meet a lot of like entrepreneurs who are doing this themselves. So they always think, well, it's, can't be me, it's them. And all I gotta say is, no,
Yeah, I
it
was
can be you.
talking to someone about this. I feel like a little bit of that is also belief or hope, like the hope or belief in yourself, or even knowing that whatever you want is going to happen in life and you're just going to go about doing it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. If you don't believe it can happen, it'll never happen. Like, it's just that simple. And that's why most entrepreneurs have to be just delusionally optimistic. It really is, like, that is probably the biggest necessity. I've never met an entrepreneur who did not believe in themselves and believe it was possible, who ended up making it possible. I think that's
Yeah. I feel like I started playing soccer recently. Like, I'm stuck in a goalie's net. I was like, the day, like if a ghost went in, I get nervous. I'm bad at goalie my first time.
Yep.
Something goes in, I'm like, oh my God, now I feel bad. And now I start playing worse. And then it's like, okay, no, that actually makes such a huge difference. Just thinking that, oh, I'm going to stop this versus am I going to stop it? And that like little
Yep.
mental difference.
Literally, it's everything. And it's just, I've been trying to teach my little cousin that when we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm like, well, you gotta, that's the whole concept of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like, believe in the heart of the cards. You gotta believe that the next card will be the card that you needed and the universe is gonna deliver it to you. And whenever he's not sure, I'll just say, like, believe in the heart of the cards. What card do you need? And he'll be like, I think, I guess I need this one. This one would like be the perfect card for me to get you with, and then he'll draw it, and he'll just be like, dang, this kid just manifested this card out of nowhere. And that's that really does seem to be half the battle. Pretty cool.
Well, that was everything I had for the entire conversation. It was really nice meeting you. I'll keep it on record though, in case we wanted to talk after. Or I know you mentioned you like to keep the entire thing on record.
I'm pretty easy. Yep, no cuts. I just keep it on. But no, this is great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the time, and I really enjoyed the conversation. You came with some great questions. So
Yeah, I
appreciate it.
loved meeting you. Like, I feel like you had such an interesting background. I feel like everyone Eric knows has such an interesting background.
Eric does. Eric knows a lot of good people, and that's why we've made a good team, I think, is just we got a lot of interesting people that just kind of like fall into our laps and end up making the whole thing more interesting. And yeah, that's half the battle too. Is just recognizing that sometimes an interesting life is better than a good life. You can always pick to have an interesting life. You can't always pick to have a good life.
Yeah, you
But
can't
you can
guarantee
always
a good
yeah,
life.
you can't guarantee, but you can guarantee interesting if you just go out and do some crazy shit every once in a while. Yep.
Yeah, and speaking about that, I was actually reading what was it, The Psychology of Money the other day, and or today. It was more like, oh, you should actually focus on discipline. Is another like focusing on the boring tasks every day. I was like, oh yes, you can't just focus on the fun stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that's always been the hard part for me is I'm really bad at not focusing on the fun stuff and leads me to good places most of the time, but yeah, ignoring the bad stuff for too long ends up
Yeah,
you
it's
gotta
just
find
too much.
someone who likes doing the fun stuff. You gotta have like a guy that likes that part, which I have a guy who's like just loves a good spreadsheet. You're like, all right, you go have fun.
Everyone has different ideas of fun, right?
Yeah,
So whatever
yeah,
my ideas, as long as you have a different idea of fun, it's good.
exactly. Yeah, like you go knock yourself out. I will be far away from.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So what do you have going on? Are you mostly just working on the podcast right now, or is it kind of like side hustle?
Yeah, so the right now we're mostly working on the podcast as a way to form distribution. We started building out a product and then we kind of discovered the hardest part about building right now isn't really the product. It's more the actual distribution, and the distribution is a lot more messier. And so we're like, okay, we've taken a step back from our actual product as a whole and first secure the lines, means of distribution, figure out a better niche for the product, because the niche we were in really wasn't, it was a niche. It was an M&A niche. It was a nice niche.
Mhm.
But like that niche could use a product, use Claude or use another set of products much better for what they
Mhm.
needed
Yeah,
rather than what we were doing. So we're
yeah,
like, okay, you know what? And it doesn't make sense to even try competing in that market where that's what I'm talking about. When you go to headless apps and all that space, if I try going into there, and even if I try going into that niche, there's a good chance within a year or 2 years, Claude is just going to be like, okay, we'll do that better
yep,
than you. And
yep,
there's no point of
yep.
that.
Yeah, no, that is the hard part. I think that's why a lot of people are just like sitting and waiting to see how things kind of pan out. And I do think that's why consumer is actually easier than B2B right now because B2B has some guy who now they were like, oh, our guy could just rebuild this for us. And that's the first question
In
they
Claude,
ask
yeah.
after a partner meeting is, could you just build this? Yeah. But, consumer, it's network effects.
Yeah, even someone was asking me, like, what do you think of this product for their business? And I was like, well, you could build that out with just this. And I can point out what people are building it out with. It's gotten to a point where it's hard to build for that level, or we were focusing more on specialized use cases. So, services rather than actual product until we identify an
Yeah.
actual, I don't want to say
Yeah.
use case because everything is a use case and that's the problem with AI, but like a use case that I'm happy with.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah, that is the tough part right now, honestly. And I think that is kind of I think where the real money is like, building for the developers who can now build on top of all these things, creating the infrastructure that plugs
Yes.
into the platforms that they're utilizing. And so,
That's why I loved hearing
yeah,
about dating as well. Like, I guess your API that lets other people build on top. That just sounds like the next evolution of what it should be. Because if everyone can build a dating app, what's stopping?
yep. That's what I
Like,
want. I want everyone to build their own dating app. Like, I want everyone to give it a shot and say, okay, I want to do the one with video. I want to do the one where you just meet up and sight unseen, and some dude in the back is there with a camera, and everyone's prediction market betting on how it's gonna go. Like it could be whatever the hell you want. You can go have fun with it, but have all of them be interconnected so that if you are on one, then we're learning from it and we're continuing to refine our product as a result of learning across all these other experiences built on top. So reinforce the product and then package it with monetization. So, I mean, I think that's the real problem people are having right now is I can build all this cool stuff. How am I ever going to make money off of it? And so if you can at least package those so you don't have to think about that part and you can really focus on just building fun stuff, then you can build really cool stuff and not have to worry about all the other pieces and incentivize all these people who otherwise don't have that incentive.
yeah, B2B is just easier in terms of monetization, at least. Like, if a business is buying, they're paying, usually.
Yes. Yep. But I will say the sales cycles for like monetizing the data, like I would spend 6 months to
Yes.
a year talking to, United Health or one of these, massive multi-billion dollar corporations. And just at the end of it, they'd be like, actually, the guy who's spearheading this, he retired and we're just over it. You're like, I spent a year on this stupid project and you're just going to bail. Like that happened. And you just need one or two, but there wasn't a lot of it was hard to get them to be really tied to you. They were
Especially
always
like the
looking,
larger companies, right?
especially them. And even in the payments company, it was like I would do all this work to onboard a client. And then one of our competitors, after we'd already done all the verification and everything, would come to them and say, you want it for, a quarter of a percent cheaper? We'll do it. And then they'd be like, well, a quarter percent. And then it's just a race to the bottom after you've done all
Yeah.
the work. So I think that'll happen a lot with the B2B
That
SaaS right now, where
the same
everyone
thing
will
happens
say,
with factoring.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yep, you got to build the loyalty of the customer. And that's where you can do well in consumer because people do not trust anything they're using right now. And they just want real people behind these things who will treat them like human beings, who will respect, whatever agreements they've already made. And I think that is the last real moat and last real place that we can compete is just build that. And that's doing exactly what you're doing right now. Just build up the trust with the people listening, build up the brand, help them understand who you are, why you're doing it. People want to back the story more than they necessarily even want to back the founder or the product behind it. So, and the people are much more willing to do that than the VCs is one thing that does inspire me. And what I like about crypto is it does seem like crypto investors are much more willing to put their money into something they think will make the world a better place and actually become the earliest users of that product and actually help refine it and give you really good feedback in a way that no VC has ever done for me. They never actually use the product. They never actually give you good advice. You want people who actually care and are willing to kind of trench it with
So,
you at the same time.
yeah, curious. Since you guys are building, I would call dating a Web3 product, but you're not really hiding it, showing it as a Web3 product, or it's a stylistic choice. Like, would you recommend the same if like other Web3 products, or is there just to remove the stigma from your name?
I think it really depends what the product is. I'd say most things for consumer, yes, because like consumer Web3 adoption is still like almost nothing. I mean, like realistically, there are like 10,000 crypto users in the US. Like it is fucking nothing. And they're rich, but there aren't that many of them. And they're not, they're not going to be the best way to like take your product to market. So I think that's where the balance has to be struck. But I do think more and more it's going mainstream, and the more it goes mainstream, every cycle it becomes easier. I mean, it was a death knell a decade ago you couldn't even mention it, and it's slowly become more and more socially acceptable, and really we're getting now to the point where people are like, okay, I'm comfortable with it, but just don't make it any extra work at all. And so it's like, okay, like maybe once we get to that point, now we have passkey enabled wallets where you don't need a seed phrase, and so it's just passkey on your phone, which is the same experience as, all of your bank accounts now. So it's becoming more one to one with the experiences that people are used to, which hopefully will take us the rest of the way there.
Well, yeah, I loved having you on. I think we went over by like a half hour.
Oh yeah, I honestly had no idea how long it's supposed to be. But yeah, no, that was great. And yeah, if there's anything else that I can get to you or help you out with or anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're recalibrating, but for sure we'll keep in touch.
Cool. All right.
That's
Sounds
it.
like a plan. Well, appreciate this, and yeah, just let me know when it's out, and or Eric, and he'll get out there.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Cool. Have a great
All right.
rest of your day. Appreciate
You as well.